Next, we'll look at several text entry controls, and these include text block, text box, and password box controls. And all these allow for viewing and, possibly, editing of text. We'll start with the text block control, which displays static text, which can't be edited, of course. It has the standard font properties, including font family, font size, font style, and font weight. Now, isn't there a label control? Well, there is, but it's more appropriate for use with database applications. For simple, static text, you want to use the text block control instead. Now, if you want to insert a line break within your markup, you can use a special element, which is the line break element, to inject a line break into the text block's output. You'll see that in our example. You can also use the run element to input multiple font styles in the text block, because otherwise you only get the one font property. The run element can have its own formatting. Each run element will have its own set of attributes defining its formatting, and inherits from the text block any attributes that you don't set. So if you don't set a font size, for example, on the run element, it will use the font size that was set in the text block that is its parent. The text box control is similar to every other text box you've seen in every other environment. You set or get the value using the text property, and it provides many properties allowing you to interact with both layout and formatting. In terms of line breaks, you can use the text wrapping and accepts return properties. The text wrapping property indicates whether the control will wrap the text within the control, and the accepts return property allows you to control whether the user can press the Enter key to insert a return, a line feed that is, into the text in the text box. You can control the enabled and read-only behavior of the control by setting the read-only and is-enabled properties. When the is-enabled property is false, you can't interact with the clipboard, like you can't copy the text from the text box onto the clipboard. There are scroll bars that you can show as well, and these are only visible when requested. You can set the vertical scroll bar visibility and horizontal scroll bar visibility properties to one of disabled so they never show, auto so that they show when needed, hidden so that they're hidden, and visible meaning they're always visible. The text box has several events that you'll find useful, including key down, key up, and text changed. You trap the key down or key up events if you want to know which key the user pressed. And those are useful if you want to know if the user presses left arrow, right arrow, up or down. That is, keys that don't insert text into the text box. There's a text changed event if all you want to know about is if the user has changed the text, and most of the time that is what you care about. Let's try a demo that shows off those two controls. I've selected the text block page on our sample application, and here you can see a text box that allows me to supply the text property for this text block. And of course I can type stuff, and it appears within the text block. And you can see it down here in my markup. And what's interesting is, unlike other controls, the text block allows you to place its text property either as an attribute or just as the content of the text block element itself. Now, if I come down here and insert line feeds or carriage returns, I have code in the sample that parses the text in the text box, and wherever it finds a carriage return line feed, it injects a line break element into the output. You can see them here. And that's how you get line breaks into your text block, by specifying line break elements in the text property. We can also specify the foreground color and the font family. Now here I've just picked a subset of all the available fonts. I could have listed them all, but I figured I'd pick the ones I'm most likely to use. There we are. We can choose that font. We can choose a font size. We can set a font style, normal or italic. We can choose a text alignment like left alignment or centered alignment. The text wrapping can be set to no wrap, wrap, or wrap with overflow. If I choose no wrap, Well, this has line breaks, of course. Let me get a long line that doesn't have line breaks so you can test out wrapping. At this point, you can see it's not wrapping. It's just not wrapping at all. If I put this back to wrap, it'll wrap within the control. And the font weight can be set to, well, again, this font doesn't show much difference between thin, extra light, light, and normal. When I get to bold, though, it starts to look a little different. There we go. There really are some fonts that have multiple gradations of bold. This one does not. I also want to demonstrate the run element. So let me switch that on, and we change the text completely. And you can see here that I have within the markup, within the text, here, we have several run elements. Here's one, there. And it says, open run element, font style is italic, font family is Georgia, font size is 24, foreground is magenta, and the content is a. Then a second run where the font family is Verdana, the font size is 32, the foreground is blue, the text test. Now, if I hadn't specified any of those attributes, they would have inherited them from the parent control, that is, the text block control itself. But since I specified all the attributes, they all became part of this individual run. That's pretty much what you can do with a text block control for displaying, but not editing, text. Let's look at the text box control. This one allows you to enter your own text. Now, right now, I have accepts return set to true, so I can enter a new line. We'll talk more about all this in a little bit. Accepts return is true. If I turn that off, I can press return all I like. And you can even see here, even though we haven't discussed it, that I'm getting return keys registered, that it's not entering a new line. I can't enter a new line because I turned off accepts return. Now here I can set the vertical alignment to top, so it fills just the space it needs on the top, center, bottom, or stretch, so it stretches the entire height of its container. We can do the same for horizontal alignment. It can be left, center, right, or stretch. In terms of vertical scroll bar and horizontal scroll bar, we can have those visible if necessary or always on. Right now, if we turn them visible, it'll become visible but unused. If we set it to auto, then it only appears if it's necessary. And now you can see it is necessary, so it displays. Let me turn off text wrapping and enter a long line here. I'll copy that to clipboard, paste it back in a few times. And of course, we're now going off past the end of my text box. If I turn horizontal scroll bar to auto, then if I need the horizontal scroll bar, it will appear. Otherwise, it won't. I don't need it now, so it doesn't appear. We can set the maximum length property. Let me delete some of this junk. We can set the maximum length property to a value other than 0. If it's 0, you can enter as much text as you like. If we set this to 20, we have a maximum of 20 characters. So at this point, I can't add anything more because I'm already more than 20 characters. If I make this shorter, I can enter characters until I hit 20, and then that's as far as I can go. We can set the text alignment to left or right or center or justify. Won't do anything for this short paragraph. We can set the text wrapping to wrap or no wrap. You've seen that already. We can set this to is read only, which means I can interact with it, but I can't enter more text. I can set it to is enabled off. So at this point, it has to be read only because it's not enabled. So I make this checked here. Is enabled is false. I can't even select text in there at all. So it has no interaction with the clipboard because I can't select the text to copy to the clipboard. Let me clear this list and play with key events. As I type into the text box, several events occur. Here, I better make it not read only if I want to interact with it. You can see I'm using the backspace key, but let me get back to here, clear the list, and start typing now. Come in here, I'll type an A. At this point, you can see that the key that was pressed down was the A key, and they don't keep track of whether it's lowercase or uppercase A. It's the A key on the keyboard. The text changed event occurred, and then the key up event occurred. I'm filling this list from bottom on up. So the latest event occurs at the top of this list. Let me try it with Shift-A and see what happens. Ready? Then I got the left Shift key went down, and you can see in parentheses I'm showing the state of the control keys, that is, all the modifying keys. Here, next the A key went down, then the text changed, then the A key went up, and the left Shift key went up. Let's try another one. How about Control A? Funny things happen when you use Control A. Well, Control A selects all, right? That's what Control A does. So we get the Control key down, the A key up, and the Control key up. But we never got a key down for the A. That's just the way they process these events. When the Control key is down, they clearly don't raise the key down event for the letter key that goes with it. How about for Control and Shift? Let me go here, I'll press Control Shift S, and so we get the Control down, the Shift down, and now we have both Control and Shift down. Then the S key gets down, then S key comes up while Control and Shift are still pressed. I let go of the Shift, so Control is still down, then I let go of the Control key, and everything's back the way it was. So you can use the key down, key up, and key pressed events to understand what's going on while users interact with your text box control. The password box control is much like the text box control, but its purpose is to allow users to enter password text hidden from view. You set the password char property to set the character that's shown instead of the characters that the user types. There's no text property for this control. You can retrieve the password property in code. You can set the password property, but there's no text property. There's no support for the clipboard either. It wouldn't make much sense if you let people copy the password out of this control, paste it in Notepad, and then they know the password. So that doesn't work. I will mention that very few characters work well as the password character. An asterisk, a round circle, an underscore maybe, but that's about it. So let's look at an example that demonstrates the password box control. I've selected the password box tab on our sample application, and you can see the current password is pass@word1. Let me change it to something else. Oops, can't type much more because the max length property is set to 10. I can set it to any value I like and can now type my entire password. You can see down here the password has been set. We can change the password char property to something else. And as I type, we see that asterisk instead. I can come here, but I cannot copy or cut this thing. That's not allowed. That wouldn't make much sense here. So we have an easy way to allow users to enter a password in a protected sort of way, and you should know that the password control uses in-memory encryption, so that passwords can't be determined by client-side exploits. Silverlight doesn't have this feature, WPF does, so this password box control is safe from another application stealing this text in memory. The calendar control allows you to select no date at all. It means it allows you to display a calendar. You can select a single date, a single range of dates, or multiple ranges of dates. And that indicates you can also select multiple single dates. That is, a date here, a date there, and so on. You can set blackout dates so that users can't select certain dates, and they're indicated with an X or some UI. You can specify the range of available dates, so users can only pick dates within that range. You can control the default display mode, which can be month, year, or decade, and you can optionally highlight the current date. That's the default behavior. The date picker control allows you to select a single date using a drop-down calendar, and it looks something like this. You have a little text box, a button to click, and a drop-down portion that represents the calendar you're choosing from. So it's kind of like a combination of a text box and a calendar control. Now the date picker control provides an is drop-down open property which you can get or set. If you retrieve it, you can determine has the user dropped down the calendar or not, and if you set it, you can force the calendar to be dropped down. There's a selected date format property that lets you choose what the selected date looks like in the text box portion. And there's a selected date changed event that allows you to know when the user has changed the selected date. Let's look at examples of the calendar and date picker controls. I have selected the calendar page on our sample application, and here you can see I can select a date by clicking on the calendar, and the selected dates over here indicates what I've currently selected. I can set the display mode to be month or year. There I see all the months for a year. Or decade. Here I see all the years in the current decade. And from there I can drill down to a date that I want and select it, and it appears in my list of selected dates. I can also go back to year view just by clicking on the date here. It takes me to year view. Clicking again takes me to decade view. So by setting those properties in code, I'm just indicating what I want it to appear like, but the user can do that as well. Let me select a date, say here. Great. And now let's say I want to restrict the display date start and end. I could, for example, say I only want dates starting on April 1, 2010 and ending on July 1st, 2011. That's my only range. Now if I try to go outside that range, I won't be able to. There's the ending date. Let's go back here, 2011, 2010. I can't choose anything before April 1st of 2010. That's the earliest date I can select. Here, I can set the selection mode to be single date, single range, multiple range, or none. If I select none, I won't be able to select a date at all. I can click on it, but it doesn't actually select the date. If I set this to single date, you saw that already, single range, I can click on a date and drag across, and now all 5 of those dates are selected. If I choose another range now, it deselects my original selection. If I choose multiple range, then I can select dates here and press Control-click to press dates in a second range of dates. Here I can select the first day of the week. Can be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Say Wednesday is the first day of your week, then you can make Wednesday the first day of the week. You can choose whether or not today should be highlighted. You can see that turning that on and off highlights the current date. We can also select blackout dates, dates that shouldn't be allowed to be selected. I will mention that if you black out a date that's already selected, you'll get an exception, and I'm not trapping for that exception, so I've got to make sure I don't do that. Let me try and set, say, April 1st to be a blackout date. You see it gets an X through it. April 2nd can be a blackout date, and so on. And now users can't select those dates. They can select other dates, just not the dates that are blacked out. Obviously, you get a lot more control over the calendar than I'm showing here. All I've showed so far is the ability to use various properties of the control to modify its behavior. You can override the look and feel of the control as well. Let's look at the date picker control. This one has fewer things you can do with it. Here I can choose the selected date format. It can be short or long. Let's choose a date. There's the long format. There's the short format, and these are specified by the current locale. And I can choose whether or not the calendar portion has been dropped down or not. And if I come here and drop it down, notice that the checkbox updates as well. So this can be read or written to control the behavior of this control. All I can really do is select a date and control the formatting of that date using the date picker control. To finish up this march through the simple controls, we'll look at a few other useful controls, including the slider, the progress bar, and the media element controls. The slider control is useful where you want to set a numeric value, but the actual value isn't important to the user. The relative value is what's important. In that case, the slider is a good choice. The slider selects a double value by sliding a thumb across a horizontal or a vertical line. You can set the minimum or maximum properties, well, you should set both actually, for the slider. You can set the orientation to be horizontal or vertical. You can set or retrieve the value property, so you can indicate where the thumb should appear or where the user has set it. And you can set the small change, large change, and is direction reversed properties. The small change and large change properties determine how the slider moves when you click at various places on the slider, and the is direction reversed property allows you to have the slider appear with its minimum value at the end of the slider and the maximum value at the beginning of the slider. So you can reverse the meaning of the slider's movement. The progress bar control indicates progress during some long-running process. This control isn't interactive. The user will not click on it and make something happen. It's up to your code to change the value property of the progress bar at regular intervals. By default, the minimum and maximum are set to 0 and 100, so the progress bar control can represent the percentage that is complete of some process. It's up to you to determine how much of your process has already completed. You can, of course, alter these to something else if you want. You'll set the value property to update the bar in the progress bar control. And if you don't know how long your process is going to take or how much of the process has been completed, you can set the is indeterminate property to true, and the control automatically updates itself, just repeating itself in a cycle until you set that property to false. You'll want to check out the system.windows.threading.dispatcher-timer class to run some code at regular intervals. Now, for our demonstration, that's how we're updating the progress bar at regular intervals. In your application, you probably won't need that dispatcher timer because you'll be actually executing something. And as you execute that code, perhaps in a loop, you'll update the progress bar indicating the current status of your process. Finally, we'll look at the media element control. It's easy to display media files using the media element control, and you can use it to play audio or video files. You must specify the source property, and if you specify it in code, that must be a URI value, not a string. A URI represents a path to an actual file resource. It provides a simple means of controlling the media transport. You can play, pause, stop, and so on. The control is invisible unless you're playing a video file. So if you want to play an audio file, the media element will have no user interface, no interaction with the user. Now you must specify the source property to play some media. You can control it with the isMuted property. The position property allows you to get or set what the current position within the media is. You can call the play, pause, and stop methods. And I will confess, this is a very intricate control with a lot of properties and methods which we can't demonstrate all of right now, but you can investigate the control now that you know that it exists. Let's stop and look at these three miscellaneous controls: the slider, the progress bar, and the media element. I'm displaying a slider control here on the page, and you can see that its current value is 80. I haven't changed the minimum and maximum values. They're going from 0 to 100 at this point. And so if I slide this thing down, notice that I guess my minimum's actually set to 20, isn't it? Minimum value, where's minimum? There it is. Minimum is 20, maximum is 100, and so I can go between 20 and 100. And clearly the value returned by the slider control is a high precision value number. I can change the direction, so now this becomes 20 and that becomes 100. We can change the orientation, so it's horizontal, and since direction is reversed, this is 20, this is 100. We switch it back. It's very confused. My code didn't know how to handle that situation. Okay. It got confused because it didn't know what to do because it was all messed up with the direction reversed and changing the orientation, and that would be a demo failure. Make this vertical, set this back, and there we go. 20 to 100. Good. Now we can change the small change and the large change value. If I click on the slider itself, you can see that it goes by the amount specified in large change. If I set this to 20, click on the slider, now it goes up in increments of 20. That's the large change. The small change occurs when I press the up or down arrow. Let's click on the slider. You can see it's going up by 0.1 every time. If I make that 10 and then use the up and down arrow keys, it's going up by 10 each time. So small change occurs when you click the arrow keys. Large change occurs when you click within the slider itself. You can obviously change the background to some other color if you like as well. That's the slider control. Let's look at the progress bar. Here I have a timer, which is going to run at regular intervals and update the value of this progress bar control. You'll notice that the UI of the progress bar will change depending on which operating system you're using and which theme you're using within that operating system. At this point, I see individual bars representing chunks of time within my progress bar. You might see it as a continuously stretching bar. Now, if I turn on is indeterminate, at that point, it's not using my timer at all. It actually should have turned the timer off. Instead, it just displays the progress bar with a constantly moving line, and my timer has nothing to do with anything at this point. Instead, it's the progress bar itself that's causing that movement. If I turn it off, at this point, we're back to using my timer, which indicates the length of the bar within the progress bar. Let me turn this off. Okay, how about the media element control? The media element control can play video content. There you see our friend Robert. You can't hear him because we've turned off the audio. Believe me, if you had audio turned on, and you will on your own computers, turning is muted on will mute the volume, and you can control the volume using this slider, and you can even see down here in the markup that the slider changes the volume attribute of this control. We can play, which starts in the beginning. Let's stop and play. There we go. We can pause, and play continues from where we left off. Stop stops us, and play then starts back at the beginning. Have fun playing with the media element control. It allows you to display video and audio, of course, very easily within your WPF application.